about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
And welcome to a special Warrior Creed live stream. We're streaming to you today on Sunday, the last day of the month of November in 2025, because tomorrow, Monday, the 1st of December 2025, the Midazolam death medical inquest into the Midazolam death of Derek Dimmock resumes at Southwark Coroner's Court, perhaps for the last time. And we felt we'd bring you this update before we begin covering the inquest, as is our habit, from tomorrow, and live transcribing for you the proceedings while keeping you up to date with developments in that case. So as preparation for that case, today's stream serves both as a reminder of the basic facts, but also as an announcement that the story has gone global. And really, that's the main point of today's stream. It's to demonstrate how the Midazolam story has indeed gone global. And you should be able to see on your screens now the topic and title for today's show. It says there, Midazolam inquest resumes, Swedish TV attending as story goes global. So stay with us, because over the course of this stream, we're going to explain to you how the story into the allegations being made by radical media and victim family surviving members that the UK state adopted a policy of involuntary euthanasia using midazolam combined with morphine, in the US remdesivir, and in other countries, as you're about to see, similar scenarios with sedatives and painkillers combined to bring about or hasten the premature deaths of those that were told that they had COVID. And of course, the only thing that correlates, as we've demonstrated statistically through macro analysis via a peer-reviewed paper published by Dr. Wilson Tsai last year, the only factor that correlates with all those deaths is the administration of midazolam injections. COVID cases do not correlate to the excess death that this country first experienced in April 2020, nor indeed do vaccines correlate to that first wave of excess death in 2020, because vaccines had not yet been rolled out. So logically, if the COVID cases do not statistically correlate through a macro analysis, and vaccines had not been rolled out, and yet midazolam injections do correlate with that excess death in 2020, logically, by process of elimination, what caused that huge spike in excess death in April 2020 in the UK and in other countries? It couldn't have been COVID. The cases simply do not statistically correlate. That macro analysis has been published. It's peer-reviewed. We've interviewed the author on Radical Media. It could not have been vaccines. They had not yet been rolled out in April 2020. Go and check for yourselves. That first wave of excess death is the Achilles heel for the lies told by our governments, coordinated lies by our globalist governments, who sought to purge our population of the elderly because they were too expensive to maintain. And unfortunately, the peer-reviewed statistical analysis leaves only that conclusion. And that's why the author of that paper, Dr. Wilson Tsai, concluded himself in that paper that this appears to suggest a policy of systemic euthanasia. In that background, with that in mind, the Dimmock family raised a case against to the coroner about the premature midazolam death of their family member, Derek Dimmock. That was being heard by senior coroner Dr. Julian Morris at Southwark Coroner's Court. That inquest was suspended without notice nor explanation last August and delayed until the 1st of December, which is tomorrow. And the graph you see on your screens now is a graph that demonstrates via peer-reviewed statistical analysis that correlation. The red line, as you can see, with the yellow arrow pointing at it, that huge spike in the red line is the excess death depicted in graph form in April 2020. The green line is the correlating midazolam injections with a correlation of an over 90% co-efficiency. It is the only thing that correlates to the deaths. The administration of midazolam injections, therefore, could reasonably be concluded to it could be reasonably concluded that it was those injections that led to those deaths. It could not have been COVID. Mathematically, it simply could not have been. Those COVID deaths cases do not correlate to those deaths that were attributed to COVID. It could not have been vaccines because they had not yet been rolled out. And that is really the realization that is beginning to dawn upon other media outlets across the world. And that's why we're going to demonstrate today that this story has gone global. It can no longer be denied. Whatever happens this week in the medical inquest of Derek Dimmock, and we hope the family gets justice. But whatever happens, the cat's already out the bag. The story has already come out. The genie is already out of the bottle. And we're going to demonstrate that over the course of today's stream. So first of all, as you see there, this was Radical Media reporting on the 17th of August 2025 about the suspended case. And since then, of course, it's been resuming tomorrow. It's been rescheduled for the 1st of December. One of the country's leading palliative care experts, whose face you now see on your screens there, Professor Sam Ahmadzai, one of the country's leading palliative care experts, was due to testify on behalf of the Dimmock family before the senior coroner, Dr. Julian Morris, without explanation, suspended the inquest. So he remains to testify, and this week we expect to hear the testimony of one of the country's leading palliative care experts on behalf of the Dimmock family, and that's Professor Sam Ahmadzai, who's on your screens now. He's a professor in the medical school at University of Sheffield with 30 years experience. He is a leading palliative care expert. What he says tomorrow will, or over the course of this week, will no doubt shock observers. He is going to testify as a professor in palliative care on behalf of the Dimmock family, and he's going to demonstrate that it was the misuse of these drugs, midazolam and morphine in the case of Derek Dimmock, with the policies of the Royal Trinity Hospice and the staff involved that led to the premature death, in his view, of Derek Dimmock. And all of that will come up, of course, in the inquest tomorrow. But meanwhile, there has been some very interesting developments. Who remembers, there we are, this guy on your screens right now? Well, this guy is a viral YouTube medical health educator. His name is Dr. John Campbell. He's a medical educator, a nurse practitioner and educator. He teaches medicine online in terms of how to practice medicine, the practical operational elements of it. Dr. John Campbell, who just yesterday raised the alarm and came to the very same conclusions that all of you, our regulars, will be used to hearing from Radical Media, and in fact cited the very paper by Dr. Wilson Tsai, whom Radical Media interviewed last year, 2024, and you can still go back. Radical Media is fully searchable. That interview is free for everybody to go and listen to via majidnawaz.substack.com. And the conclusions that Dr. Wilson Tsai came to in his peer-reviewed research, remember, macro statistical analysis, led him to conclude that it was mathematically impossible for anything other than or improbable for anything other than the midazolam injections leading to that April 2020 excess death. And that's the conclusion that Dr. John Campbell is now belatedly coming to, and you can see this now, and you can see the exasperation on his face as he speaks. Take a listen to this.
So looking at the big data, like the amount of Midazolam shipped out, the amount of people that died, that big data is not really reflected in the official explanations of excess deaths. This paper shows that the UK spike in deaths wrongly attributed to COVID-19 in April 2020 was not due to SARS coronavirus 2 virus, which was largely absent in April 2020, but was due to widespread use of Midazolam injections, which was statistically very highly correlated, coefficient over 90%, as we've seen, 91%, with excess deaths in all regions of England during 2020. Importantly, excess deaths remained elevated following mass vaccination in 2021. So the mass vaccination did not bring the death rates down dramatically, but were statistically uncorrelated to COVID injections. So the deaths were statistically uncorrelated with the vaccine injections, while remaining significantly correlated to Midazolam injections. There's the evidence. That correlation is very, very tight. Very alarming, very alarming implications of this work for friends and relatives of yours that are no longer with us. The widespread and persistent use of Midazolam in the United Kingdom suggests a possible policy of systemic euthanasia.
And there we have it, in Dr. John Campbell's own words, very alarming implications of this work. There's the evidence, he says, that correlation is very, very tight, very alarming implications of this work for friends and relatives of yours that are no longer with us. You all saw how in real time, Dr. John Campbell's, the wool was lifted from over his eyes on the COVID topic. Well, now in real time, the wool is being lifted over his eyes on the Midazolam topic. And this is really, interestingly, a threshold moment for this story. We don't really care at Radical Media, nor should anybody else care that's been speaking about this topic, where and how and by whom this story goes mainstream. It is the story, not the glory, that we seek here. It is the story being out there, not the glory being out there, that we seek. It doesn't matter who is saying it. Doesn't matter who said it first. It doesn't matter who gets credit for it. All of that is irrelevant. What matters is that the story gets out there and the policy of systemic euthanasia is terminated, and the people that put it in place deliberately, mind you, are brought to justice. That's what matters, so that people are no longer being involuntarily euthanized by the state. So in that light, if Dr. John Campbell has perhaps too late come to this realization, fantastic. He has an audience, a very large audience on YouTube, and unlike us, doesn't appear to be suffocated by Meta, Google, as well as Twitter. And therefore, it is quite clear that that episode of his from yesterday, half an hour long, which when we checked yesterday already had 70,000 views, is going to take this story to an audience that we at Radical Media have up until now been unable to tap into. So congratulations for those of you who really want this story out there. John Campbell's adoption of this story in this way is fantastic news for the story, but it doesn't stop there. And by the way, that's the paper he was referring to. Just reminding you all, if you want to go and check that research he's referred to, that's on your screens now. Exclusive interview, UK excess deaths correlate to lethal Midazolam injections with Dr. Wilson's side. That's by us last year. You can go to our website, majidnawaz.substack.com, and still listen to that interview with all the receipts published in the accompanying written Radical Dispatch with that podcast, and listen for yourselves to Dr. Wilson's side. Just search for Dr. Wilson's side on our Substack page, on Radical Media's Substack page, and you will find that interview. You can listen to it for free, and you can also access for free all the evidence that we've published alongside it, including all the graphs that you just saw there. It isn't just Dr. John Campbell that's come to this realization. Even the barrister representing the family, King's Counsel, James Bogle KC, Even the barrister has broken with protocol to declare his own personal view while the inquest is ongoing. And this is what he had to say about this case. Have a listen to this.
Of shortening a life, let's put it that way, rather than putting it any more controversially, is to use in combination morphine and midazolam. Midazolam is a sedative and morphine is an opiate. Well, morphine is used to eliminate pain, and midazolam is used to sedate you, ostensibly to calm you down. The combination of the two is a very effective way of shortening somebody's life. And what happens is the doses go up and up and up. Patient dies, and nobody really knows, did he die from dehydration? Did he die from malnutrition? Did he die from his underlying condition? Or did he die from having an increased dose of morphine and midazolam? And because this is why I said earlier, if you want to kill somebody, get a doctor or a nurse to do it, because it's very, very difficult to pin the blame on them. And the use of morphine and midazolam as a regular feature of treatment of the terminally ill, of the sick, of the chronically sick and elderly in the NHS is now very common. I myself, with my own mother, when I went down to visit her in hospital, I said to the doctor, "Can I have a look at the drug chart?" And the consultant said, "Well, why do you want to do it?" "I just would like to see it, if you don't mind." Sure enough, she was being given morphine and midazolam. And I had earlier said to the doctor, is she in pain? "No, she's not." "Well, is she thrashing about, or is she in any way requiring a sedative?" "No." And then when I went to the drug chart, there's morphine and midazolam.
Well, that sounds like malpractice.
Well, it does, but it's very easy to get around that. It's very easy for a doctor to say, "Well, we wanted to make sure she was comfortable. We wanted to make sure that she wasn't agitated, so we gave her midazolam."
And there you heard it, the barrister for the Dimmock family breaking with protocol and coming out with his own opinion while the inquest is still going. They're speaking to UK podcaster Peter McCormack and making his view very clear that he believes this as what's been going on. But it doesn't stop with John Campbell and James Bogle KC in the UK. The story, as we said, has gone global. It's crossed the Atlantic into the US. And here we have a case on the Joe Rogan show. We're going to bring this up on your screens, read it for you, and then play you the clip from the Rogan episode. And this is Dr. Mary Talley Bowden. She's confirmed to Joe Rogan that hospitals involuntarily euthanize patients during COVID. We're going to play that clip for you now. And again, the story has moved over across the Atlantic into the US. The story is only going to get bigger from here.
There's actually a lawsuit today that's first jury trial in the country over these hospital protocols, where they had a young woman with Down syndrome. They basically euthanized her. They gave her a DNR order, even though she didn't have one. And the father has just been wonderful. It's a Shara family. And
why did they do that? They euthanized her for what?
I've seen this. I have reviewed records from these hospital patients, and they'll euthanize them. They need the bed. They said, well, they're going to die anyway.
What was this person in the hospital for?
COVID protocol. So,
and they wait. So they were in the hospital with COVID, and they gave them something to kill them?
Yeah, that happened. I'm sorry, but that happened. People, they give them morphine and insulin.
What?
Yeah.
That's common?
Yeah. I've reviewed charts. In this situation, they gave her a DNR, which is do not resuscitate, meaning if they look like they're dying, you don't do anything, which that was not the case. So they're suing for battery, which is one way of getting around the PrEP Act, because the PrEP Act is very hard to penetrate. The PrEP Act protects everybody, all the doctors, all the hospitals from any wrongdoing during COVID. So it's been this big challenge trying to get around the PrEP Act. And this case has hope of getting around the PrEP Act because they're charging for battery, and they're in trial. It started today. It's in Wisconsin. So that gives me hope.
And as you heard Dr. Mary Bowden there speak, it's very hard in the case of doctors because they are protected through legislation and other protocols. They are protected against this kind of action. And that's what you heard earlier James Bogle KC say as well. Nevertheless, as we said, regardless of what happens in this week's inquest with the Midazolam death of Derek Dimmock, and we hope for the family's sake that they get justice, regardless of what happens, the story is already now out there. It's too late. The cat's out the bag. The genie's out the bottle. This story is going to need to come to its own conclusion. And again, we're going to continue showing you that. It's not just on Rogan that this story has started to attract attention, but even the health secretary of the US under President Trump, RFK Jr., as you see on your screens now, even he has started to speak about this. Take a listen to this.
Time in history that somebody would go to the hospital, they would get a positive test for COVID, and they would be told there's no treatment, go home until your lips turn blue, and then come back and we'll put you on a ventilator and give you remdesivir, two things that could themselves kill you. And why didn't we have a lot of protocols? Why weren't we treating people who were sick early on in the sickness so it wouldn't progress? And that, is, I think, a real failure of health agencies and a failure of the medical system. And we're changing that now.
Now, remember, in the UK, it was Midazolam. In the US, it was remdesivir. That's the drug you just heard RFK Jr. refer to. If any of you remember the care home scandal that led to the ousting of New York Governor Cuomo, it was those thousands of deaths in the care homes that he lied about, that even in the end, CNN had to out him for, leading to the end of his political career. Those care home deaths in the US involved remdesivir. Remdesivir is the US version of what in the UK is used, which is Midazolam. And so the fact that the Health Secretary RFK Jr. there is looking at that with the Rogan episode brings us neatly to the next country we're going to mention. So the story's gone global. It's gone to the US. It's also now affecting Europe. So a Swedish TV crew we can confirm this as Radical Media on authority of the Dimmock family, a Swedish documentary crew has applied to Southwark Coroner's Court for permission to attend every day of the inquest this week. They are going to be covering the inquest and are making a feature documentary in Sweden, in the Swedish language, about a similar scandal that they suspect has occurred over there. We're going to give you the brief of that on the screens now. This is from the Radical Dispatch that we'll publish immediately after this stream. Swedish TV crew and German story. First of all, the Swedish one. Reporters for the Swedish investigative TV program, Mission Investigate, which in Swedish is Uppdrag Granskning, I hope I pronounced that correctly, with the Swedish Public Service Television SVT, will be attending tomorrow's resumed Midazolam death inquest of Derek Dimmock at Southwark Coroner's Court. The Swedish TV crew have confirmed to the Dimmock family that they are currently looking into the practice of palliative end-of-life care within the setting of community nursing homes in Sweden. This comes following several cases in Sweden where the kit of anticipatory palliative medication, or LCP, the Liverpool Care Pathway. Our regulars will know that Liverpool Care Pathway is the very pathway in the UK that was discontinued, that was ended due to the fact that it was causing deaths in hospitals. Sweden adopted it. Continuing reading. This comes following several cases in Sweden where the kit of anticipatory palliative medication, or Liverpool Care Pathway medication, which it was called in Sweden some years back, has been used in ways which has been questioned by clinicians from the field of specialized palliative care. The kit of medication includes morphine, midazolam, Haldol, and Robinol. The TV crew has stated that just like the UK, Sweden too has a rise of the administration of these medications during the excess death peak during April 2020. There you have it, folks. The Swedish documentary crew that is attending the Midazolam death inquest into Derek Dimmock this week are also looking at the very same thing in Sweden, the excess death of 2020 being caused by Sweden having adopted a Liverpool Care Pathway style end-of-life care treatment involving the use of Midazolam. They are making a documentary anyway in the Swedish language about that. They realize that that's ongoing here, so they're coming over to cover the inquest here, to feature that inquest as part of their documentary. And we at Radical Media can also confirm that as part of that story, they'll be interviewing none other than the Dimmock family expert witness for the Dimmock family, who's due to testify, Professor Sam Ahmadzai, one of the country's leading palliative care experts. He will be interviewed by that Swedish documentary, TV documentary company over the course of this week to speak to matters of his expertise and his knowledge about how this system was put in place here in the UK and in Sweden. The story has already gone global. There is no way Matt Hancock can put this genie back in the bottle. Now we have a Swedish documentary. And by the way, SVT, this is the equivalent of a Dispatches style, very well established mainstream Swedish documentary. We can confirm that they are already seeking to interview Professor Sam Ahmadzai. They are in touch with the Dimmock family, and they've applied to the coroner's court for access to the inquest into the Midazolam death of Derek Dimmock. So the story we've demonstrated with Dr. John Campbell in the UK, it's blowing up. It's on Rogan in the US, and RFK Jr., the health secretary, is addressing it, and a TV crew from Sweden is coming to address this as well. But also, interestingly, the BBC reported that this is a story that's now affecting Germany as well. And on your screens now, you can see the BBC headline. And this is a story from 6th of November, just this month. And it's headlined, German nurse gets life in jail after murdering 10 to reduce workload. And a quote from the article, a palliative care nurse in Germany has been sentenced to life in prison after he was convicted of the murder of 10 patients and the attempted murder of 27 others. Prosecutors allege that the man, who has not been publicly named, injected his mostly elderly patients with painkillers or sedatives in an effort to ease his workload during shifts overnight. Oh dear. Painkillers or sedatives leading to death? So we've got these case in Germany, a Swedish TV crew coming to cover the story because they've got the similar problems in Sweden. We've got Joe Rogan in the US now addressing this as well. Dr. John Campbell in the UK addressing it too. And in addition, the Midazolam scandal hits Canada. Reading to you now. Meanwhile, new Canadian research has arrived at the same conclusions as last year's peer-reviewed statistical analysis by Dr. Wilson Tsai. And we'll just read this post here. Breaking. An explosive new report is turning the COVID pandemic narrative on its head, and the data is damning. A bombshell analysis published by the Canadian research group Correlation reveals that the 2020 interesting date, isn't it? 2020. Why is that date so important? Because remember, folks, it's the Achilles heel. COVID cases do not correlate with the excess death spike in April 2020, and the vaccines had not yet been rolled out. So that April 2020 excess death is the test case. It is the litmus case. It is the Achilles heel for everybody. We here at Radical Media have been going on about Midazolam, while others have been, obviously mainstream corporate media, have been talking about COVID, but even in the alternative media space, for good reason, people are focused on vaccines. What they miss is that the vaccine question, however you resolve it, does not address the excess death spike in April 2020 because vaccines have not yet been rolled out. That only leaves you with the end-of-life protocols. Midazolam in the UK and Sweden now, apparently, and remdesivir in the US, and now Canada. Continuing reading from this post, an explosive new report is turning the COVID pandemic narrative on its head, and the data is damning. A bombshell analysis published by the Canadian research group Correlation reveals that the 2020 mortality surge across Europe, 2020, there's the date, and the US did not follow the pattern of a viral outbreak. Oh dear. Instead, the evidence points to something far more chilling, the mass mistreatment of vulnerable patients inside hospitals and nursing homes. The 400-page report, authored by researchers Joseph Hickey, Dennis Rancourt, and Christian Linnard, lays out a case that the deadly first wave from March to May 2020 was not a natural pandemic. Right, now we're going to show you that paper. There it is, Slay News reports 1st of July 2025. New report confirms COVID death spikes in 2020 were driven by hospitals, not a virus. And we're going to read from that article that should be on your screens now, the text of it. The 400-page report, don't worry, we'll show you the actual report in a second, authored by researchers Joseph Hickey, Dennis Rancourt, and Christian Leonard, lays out a case that the deadly first wave from March to May 2020 was not a natural pandemic. It was a man-made medical disaster. Where excess mortality occurred, it was of institutional and iatrogenic origin, caused by mistreatment of frail and vulnerable people in hospitals and nursing homes. Now, the key word there in bold, you should be able to see on your screens, is iatrogenic. What does that mean? Well, the word iatrogenic means that the deaths were caused by the medical intervention to stop them itself. So the thing that the doctors did to stop the deaths is what caused the deaths. That's what the word iatrogenic means. Why are we honing in on that word? Because surprise, surprise, that's the very word that Dr. Wilson Tsai used last year in his peer-reviewed statistical analysis, from which he concluded that the only thing that could have caused these deaths was a systemic policy of euthanasia. In other words, deliberate. In other words, iatrogenic. The deaths were caused by the actions of the doctors themselves. And here is the Canadian research. So first of all, that's just reminding you that's the Dr. Wilson Tsai's paper in the interview from last year. But here is the Canadian paper. That should be on your screens now. And we're going to blow it up for you so you can see it properly. Correlation reports 13th of June 2025. Constraints from geotemporal evolution of all-cause mortality on the hypothesis of disease spread during COVID. That's the paper that comes to the same conclusions as Dr. Wilson Tsai's research. And of course, that means that Canada has experienced the same as the US, as Sweden, as perhaps Germany. We've shown you all the receipts for that, and most likely the UK as well. And there's a quote from the paper that we just read for you quickly so that you guys can rest assured that these things are thoroughly checked by us here at Radical Media. Blow that up on your screens now, and we'll read the quote for you as it's on your screens. Correlation has published a new report entitled Constraints from Geotemporal Evolution of All-Cause Mortality on the Hypothesis of Disease Spread During COVID, authored by Joseph Hickey, Dennis G. Rancourt, and Christian Leonard. Using high-resolution geotemporal all-cause mortality data, the authors show that mortality patterns during March to May 2020 in Europe and the USA are incompatible with the dominant paradigm of having been caused by person-to-person spread of a novel infection virus. That is damning. It is damning. And as you can probably already see on your screens, it isn't just Canada. It isn't just the US. It isn't just Sweden, Germany, and certainly isn't just the UK, but also Ireland. And that's what we're coming to next. Midazolam scandal hits Ireland. And that's something we'll read for you before playing for you a clip. Exclusive expose. Senior Irish pharmacist has just made the most damning protected disclosure I've seen about Ireland's COVID response. And let's play that for you. Here we are. And this is Una McGurk. All right, here we are. Take a listen to this.
Home, there were no protocols for the care of these people. In the hospitals, they had been getting treatment, but when they arrived in the nursing homes, there was no protocol for treatment. And this is one of the things that you may recall Dr. Marcus de Bruin spoke about when you interviewed him recently. In fact, he was so incensed by this policy that he actually resigned from the medical council because he saw that there were no treatment protocols. And the only thing that they were given was end-of-life care, like do not resuscitate. And they were given drugs like Midazolam. And I don't know if you know about Midazolam, and I don't know if the viewers. It's an end-of-life drug. It speeds up your death. It causes kidney failure. It's a horrific drug. Not only that, but it is a respiratory suppressant. So why would anybody give Midazolam to a patient that suppresses their respiratory system when we are supposed to be in the midst of a respiratory crisis like COVID? It simply doesn't make sense. So this was a very, very bizarre policy. Now, it's not clear who directed the protocols for the care or the end-of-life care. But what in effect happened was that in April of 2020, there was a spike in deaths. in nursing homes in
Can I
Ireland.
bring up my slide now?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
I wanted to get to this slide as
Yeah.
fast as possible.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And this is a slide, and by the way, this is a slide which is contained in this protected
Yeah, that's the
disclosures
point, yeah.
document, and that's why I'm using it. And so, for the viewer can see that the dark, thick lines represent the deaths that took place, and as you can see, you know, fourth in from the bottom, April 2020, there is obviously a very massive spike in deaths. I mean, it's very, very clear. And then coincidentally, the thinner line, which in reality follows it, it's red in reality. You can see it exactly. There's a huge spike then of that thinner line. That thinner line represents the administration of midazolam.
And again, as you just heard from the case in Ireland, that is a correlation between midazolam and the huge excess death spike in when? 2020. When particularly? Specifically, April 2020, while COVID vaccines had not yet been rolled out. And we know from the same statistical analysis on a macro level, peer-reviewed, done by Dr. Wilson Tsai, that COVID cases do not correlate to the April 2020 deaths. The only thing that correlates in the UK, in Ireland, in the US, in Canada, and in Sweden, it would appear to be as well. The only thing that correlates is the administration of end-of-life pathway drugs, such as midazolam in the UK or remdesivir in the US, with a painkiller such as morphine. Now, that would seem to suggest a coordinated policy by participating countries. And of course, globalist countries did coordinate their COVID strategy together. It would seem to suggest a coordinated strategy of involuntary euthanasia of the elderly in hospices and care homes in order to purge them from society. And as scandalous as that conclusion sounds, the evidence is pointing not only in that direction, but no other direction has evidence supporting it. The evidence doesn't support any other theory and only supports this theory. Where does that leave us in terms of a conclusion? And it's also multi-country. And so at the end of the day, and there is the graph, you should be able to see that graph that that they refer to there from Ireland. We'll just blow it up for you one more time on your screen so you can have a look at it. That is very similar to the graph that Dr. Wilson Tsai used that we showed you at the top of this show. Correlation between excess death in April 2020 with midazolam being the red line. And it is therefore unavoidable as a conclusion that, as we stated, and to repeat, the key part to understand this is what caused the huge spike in excess death in April 2020. Nobody disputes that was a huge and unprecedented spike in excess death in April 2020. That part is not in dispute. The question is what caused it. It could not have been COVID vaccines, though, of course, they're harmful in their own right, and they didn't stop COVID, nor infection, nor transmission, and most likely caused a lot of other harms to people's health. But the April 2020 excess death was not caused by those vaccines because they had not yet been rolled out. It could also not have been caused by COVID because on a macro analysis, using all the data, doing a statistical analysis, mathematically, they could not have been caused by COVID because COVID cases simply do not correlate to the April 2020 excess death spikes. The only thing that correlates is the use of midazolam injections. When you combine that with the known fact that the infection fatality rate for those that were told that they had COVID was similar to the flu, there's no way, even if it had been COVID, that it should have caused that huge excess death spike in April 2020. What you should have seen is flu-like death patterns, not a huge spike like those graphs represent. That's the very spike, by the way, that they used to panic us all into multiple lockdowns across the world. Remember that. So even at the time, they weren't considering it a normal flu death-like pattern. It was an abnormal spike of death. They used that, they leveraged it to force injections on us and force lockdowns and mask mandates on us. So even they acknowledged it was an irregular death pattern, but it could not have been caused by COVID because in hindsight, with the macro data in, with the statistical analysis done, peer-reviewed as it is, it's not mathematically possible for those deaths to be caused by COVID. It is simply not logically possible for them to have been caused by the COVID vaccines. They had not yet been rolled out. The only thing left is the use of midazolam injections with a painkiller to hasten the deaths of those who were told that they had COVID. It is a terrible conclusion, but the only conclusion that remains, and also the only conclusion that the evidence points to, while the evidence also excludes all other conclusions. Now, the death of Derek Dimmock is a test case, in this issue, because the Dimmock family, are making that very same allegation. They're saying that Derek Dimmock was not dying and that his death was hastened without their consent, without their permission. It was hastened by Royal Trinity Hospice in the manner that we've just described. And they've gone to the senior coroner at Southwark Coroner's Court in London to make that representation. And the Southwark Coroner's Court is due to hear the country's leading palliative care professor, Sam Ahmadzai, on behalf of the family, who is due to testify this week that he believes the family. If the Derek Dimmock family win this inquest, or even if the conclusion points to what they're saying being validated, it opens up the floodgates around the entire world for this story. You've just seen over the course of this stream, these questions are now being asked in Sweden, in Germany, in America, in Canada, in Ireland, and they will be asked everywhere else where this happened as well. This is the test case. These are the floodgates. When we first, with a handful of others, such as Jackie Devoy and others, when we first started speaking about this case, it was deemed, even by conspiracy theorists, it was deemed a conspiracy theory. Many of you will remember that. Even the so-called conspiracy theorists were saying this story is a conspiracy theory. Where are they now? Look how times have changed. People should have known that on Radical Media, we don't just willy-nilly adopt stories without evidence, without receipts, and go on about them for so long. But of course, time is vindicating. We are where we are now. Dr. John Campbell in the UK, as you saw from his video yesterday, has adopted this and is incredibly concerned. And this story is simply not going to go away. And we conclude on this point, regardless of how the Dimmock inquest proceeds at Southwark Coroner's Court from tomorrow, whether or not the verdict that the coroner delivers is in the interest of the Dimmock family or not, it's too late. The cat's out the bag. People now know what happened, and they will demand answers. And we point to UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock as a reasonably good place to begin demanding those answers. He was the health secretary at the time that this happened. We also point to Dr. Luke Evans MP, a Conservative MP, who advised Matt Hancock on this policy. These are the people responsible, the Royal Trinity Hospice. These are the people responsible for what has happened. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who was PM at the time during this COVID period. And we ask also, what got Dominic Cummings so spooked about the deaths in care homes to a point where he turned against his own boss, his own government, his own party, and started talking about these deaths in parliamentary testimony? While still remaining a technocrat, while still remaining pro-COVID mandates, and therefore a globalist as he is, something spooked him to such an extent that he did a 180 on his own party and began trying to save his own skin. And it happened to coincide when he got caught breaking lockdown to test his own eyesight, and suddenly he changed. It's all very interesting, isn't it? So we promise, as usual, to cover this the resuming inquest into the death of Derek Dimmock from tomorrow 9 a.m. Follow our social media accounts, in particular Twitter at Majid Nawaz. We'll be transcribing the proceedings live, and of course, we'll bring you updates upon the conclusion, whenever that is, perhaps the 5 days of this inquest. But for the meanwhile, the Midazolam story has gone global. Nothing can stop the dawning realization of everybody around the world precisely what they did during COVID and how they used COVID as a cover to involuntarily euthanize our elderly in hospitals under the guise of end-of-life care, when really they were hastening their deaths without consent. That's all we got time for today on this special episode of Warrior Creed. You've been listening to the radical Majid Nawaz, and as we say, return to us tomorrow on our socials at Majid Nawaz. That's MAJIDNAWAZ, and we'll be transcribing events at the inquest into the death of Derek Dimmock live. Meanwhile, everything you heard in today's stream, the written version of which will contain all the receipts via the regular Radical Dispatch, and you'll be able to access that on our Radical Media platform via Substack, and that's majidnawaz.substack.com. We'll, as always, make the Midazolam content free for everybody to access. It will not be behind a paywall. Until tomorrow, thank you for listening.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Good service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.